When I had just entered seminary in 1974, I remember one chief lecturer, so to say, of myself at seminary who had stayed in America for some 10 years and had come back um, claiming he has forgotten some local native languages and he was only speaking only the what we used to call the Queen's language. And in a class that he pretended to be teaching, a homiletics class, I remember um, responding to a question or whatever he had posed. I used the word, I said, we ought not to have done it. And he shook and he said, you ought. That was 1974. He said, you said ought. I didn't think you, with your apartheid education, you would know that word. And I looked at him and I was sizing him up. Now, um, now I'm reminded by another colleague and almost a younger brother who has just said to me, I did not finish one video that I was making about contextual theology. And this one brother's name I won't mention also in deference to his dignity. But what he said one day to me, on Facebook, he said it on Facebook, when I had stated very openly that Thabo Mbeki is responsible for my brother's death. And this person, I nearly said gentleman, but I don't call everybody gentleman. I know he's very gentle, but I won't call him gentleman. This man or this person said, wow, it's surprising. I don't believe an intellectual like Thabo Mbeki can do such. Now, this is South Africa for you, brother. Let me go back to the topic of contextual theology. I went to the contextual theology conference, and one of the first persons I met there at the door of the main hall, St. Paul's Anglican Church in Western Jabavu, was Frank Chikani during break. And I said to him, hey, man, Frank, tell me, don't you people think there is an element of liberation in African theology that has to be explored? And he shrugged his shoulders. He says, I don't know anything about African theology. And this was a leader in the Institute of Contextual Theology who did not know anything about. And also, I remember now when I went to, this was 1985, but when I had gone to America for the first time in 1994, the gentleman who had been awed by the fact that I had used the word ought, I don't know what figure of speech was that. I'm no more into the grammars and all that. And when we landed in America, in New York, he came to me and says to me, Paul, this is America. I said, my goodness, what's happening here, man? And in no time, I was walking off Broadway and on 42nd Street or whatever of the New Yorks, and this person has said, "This is America." I said, "My goodness." Well, we have such people in this world and in this country. So after Frank had had answered me in a way that he answered, then I encountered Dr. Bonganjalo Goba, who was a lecturer at FEDSEM, Federated um, Seminary of many churches. And he said he was talking to his other colleague, and he was saying, you know, um, people don't realize that you can outgrow church. He says, one day I will outgrow the church. I said, wow, outgrow the church. It has been in my mind ever since. It was only 10 years having gone the way of the ministry of the church. And I knew that one day I will outgrow the church. But here's a professor of theology saying, it is something that you can outgrow, and that you would outgrow if need be. And and I had remembered my director of Young People's Department, Mrs. Pel Peloachai, one day saying, Paul, what do you think you will be doing in old age in the ministry? As I said very openly, Ma'am Pel, I will quit the ministry one day. And of course, I only quit it in year 2007. So I said, and she said, and then what will you do? I said, man, I'll go into business. And here I am. I still have to go into business since 2007. So my prediction was not very accurate, but this is, and then it comes to the point of many people who have done contextual theology and have been part of the institution of contextual theology. It is surprising how much they have been pulled by the nose by white theologians who forced them to state that the departed of black people, departed souls, are the living dead. And without them realizing, because they're not well read, that in the 17th century, some novels were written about the living dead by Europeans, of course, and the concept of the living dead. And these were supposed to be the dead that devours the other dead, some ghouls and ghastly ghosts that devour other ghosts. Now, can you imagine being forced into the corner up until today, and you still believe that your people are the living dead? When the people, we believe that our people who are no more here are just gone to the yonder. They have passed on to another life. And we know that it is more glorious than here. So to call them the living dead is a very bad insult. It is a deadly insult that will go on to poison the minds of our people. The concept constructed and put together by Europeans, transferred to so-called black theologians and contextual theologians, and they still harp on calling our people the living dead. Man, you guys can't think properly. You should have just been biblists and forgot about theology, because you don't match up to the standard of theology. You don't, if you don't know the basics of African theology, so to say, or African way of spirituality. I'm avoiding the word religion because Africa has never known any religion. Africa has been more spiritual for lack of other words, but it has also just been a way of life. And even when we say it's a spiritual life, we are just putting some glory on top. It is actually a way of life. And there has never been anything called religion until the missionaries came here, until they distorted us. And even those who were now writing an apologia to what they were saying about the departed started telling them that, yeah, agreeing with them, we will call them the living dead. My goodness, man. And you still say that in what year is this? 2026. I think the Contextual Theology Institute has long died, and you have died with it. And you are still calling our people the living dead. So, Reverend Brother, who has just asked me to expatiate, these are some of the things that went through my mind at the Conference of Contextual Theology in 1985, and continue to go on now when I see people posting even on Facebook and articulating the concept, the so-called concept, the concept of the so-called, the concept of the so-called living dead. How can you be the living dead? This is a huge, huge, huge insult ever on the African soul and psyche and mind and the heart. All those things that refer to even poetically or philosophically to the being of a human being, to the being of the human being. Okay,